Hello again, my name is Justin Shorty. I'm a health educator here at the T-Snows Wellness Center. Today I have more recipes to share for our National Nutrition Month of March. Today I will be showing a sweet potato shepherd's pie, and this pie is going to be made with two different varieties of sweet potato. We have a white potato and a red potato with orange flesh. And then our other ingredients that we're going to be using is going to be lean ground turkey. And this is roughly 1 pound of lean ground turkey. And the thing about with lean ground turkey is it's going to be lower in saturated fats, which means there's less risk of having too much fats when you're eating this meal, and you don't have to worry about draining the meat to reduce the fat. And on top of that, we are going to be using some frozen veggies, about 12 ounces, which is going to be a little bit more than a cup. A small diced white onion. 2 teaspoons of garlic or 2 minced garlic cloves. Some Worcestershire sauce, yellow mustard, some black pepper to season, and to help thicken, we're going to be using some cornstarch. And now for the crust itself, for the sweet potatoes, we're going to be adding some butter so it allows it to become more creamy. For your first step, we're going to get a small to medium sized pot, and we're going to fill it with water, and we're going to bring that to a boil. Now, instead of boiling our sweet potatoes, we're going to be steaming them. And oftentimes when people talk about steaming versus boiling versus microwaving, steaming and microwaving helps to preserve a lot of the nutrients within the vegetables that you're cooking, versus boiling, a lot of the nutrients leak into the water. So that's why sometimes some recipes they'll call to preserve a lot of the water if you're boiling, because you're getting those nutrients rather than losing out of them. So for today, I'm going to be using a strainer mesh. These are not costly, and you should always invest in one if you're interested in preserving a lot of the nutrients that you're cooking in your recipes. So when the water starts to boil and the steam mesh is inside the pot, you're going to finely cube some of your sweet potatoes to roughly get 1 pound, and you're going to add that to the pot, cover, and let it steam for about 13 to 15 minutes until it softens. So now that the potatoes are nice and steamed and tender, we're going to allow it to cool, and then we're going to move on to our other side of the table. So when it comes to reducing the amount of fats within your foods, it's good to use a cooking spray, because that means you don't have to use as much oil. So our next step is we're going to be cooking our diced onions. Now we're going to saute our onions until they become fully translucent, and onions are a great way to bring a lot of flavor to your foods. They are very low in calories, and they are also very good for your heart. And for some people, if you don't want to use any oil whatsoever when you're sauteing your onions, you can also use some water as well. And now, when our onions are becoming nice and translucent, we're going to add our 2 teaspoons or 2 garlic cloves of minced garlic. And we're going to cook an additional 30 seconds. And this is where we're going to get lots and lots of flavor added to our meal. Alright, so when the onions have cooked and you've cooked it for additional 30 seconds after adding the garlic, you can add it to a heat-safe bowl. For me, I'm using a 6 to 7 inch pie pan, because I'm going to be using this later in the demonstration. So we're just going to safely transfer our onions to the pan, and we're going to let it sit there until we are ready to use it again. And you don't have to worry so much about some of the garlic if it starts to stick to the pan, because we're going to still be using this same pan to cook our turkey. Now that the onions and garlic have been cooked, we're going to add our 1 pound of ground turkey to the pan. And I'm using lean ground turkey, about 90-10, so that's 90% meat and protein and 10% fat. So it's going to be very, very, very light in fat. And you're just going to cook it for about 7 minutes until it's evenly browned. And when it comes to food safety, for every sort of poultry products, chicken, eggs, turkey, it needs to be cooked to an internal temperature of 165 degrees. Okay, so when it comes to the Worcestershire sauce and mustard, I'm just combining it together to evenly mix. Well, the reason why we are using sweet potato is that it's going to be lower in starch compared to a regular white potato or russet potato. And on top of that, it has natural sweetness to it too. And for sweet potatoes, they are high in vitamin A, such as beta carotene. When it comes to your sweet potato mixture, it's up to you to add 1 to 2 tablespoons of butter or margarine, and you're just going to mash it until it becomes creamy. And so, this sweet potato mixture is going to be our crust for the pie. So now, once our ground turkey has browned in our pan, we're going to add our cooked onions and garlic back to the pan. And we're going to allow these flavors to mix together. Now the next ingredient we're going to use is black pepper, and the recipe calls for about half a teaspoon of black pepper, but this is really up to you on your preference of taste. If you want more black pepper or you don't want as much black pepper, it's really up to you on how much you want to add. So I added my black pepper, and next I'm going to add my mixture of Worcestershire sauce and yellow mustard. So I used about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. It is going to be a bit higher on the sodium level as well as the yellow mustard. So that's why I'm not going to add any additional salts to this recipe. And then I'm just going to combine. And I'm going to bring the heat down so it simmers. Next, if your pan starts to get a little bit dry, don't worry, because you're going to be adding frozen vegetables. So the ice is going to help to bring back some of the moisture if you overcook your meat. And you're just going to stir it in. And remember, I'm cooking on a lower temperature so as to not burn. And I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. And then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of cold water. And that's just to make a thick paste. And cornstarch, the real purpose, sometimes people use it to help thicken the foods that they're making. So cornstarch in this recipe is completely optional. And with this mixture, when I'm using the lean ground turkey, there's not that much oil at the bottom. And so you don't have to go through the additional hassle of draining out the grease. Now after we have fully steamed our sweet potatoes, we're going to go to our oven and we're going to set it to broil. On high. So now that all of our ingredients are combined into our pan, we're going to leave it on simmer just to allow it to fully cook. And we're going to go to our sweet potato mixture that we made. So I'm going to push it down flat and thin onto my pie pan so I can make the bottom crust. And the thing about this recipe is that there's less risk of food poisoning with this recipe because I'm not using any raw ingredients. Because everything is already cooked to temp. You can actually start to eat this sweet potato because now it kind of looks like mashed potatoes. So now that we have our pie crust down on the bottom, I'm going to grab a cup of my turkey mixture. And when you're measuring out ingredients, you don't want to pack it down. You kind of want to make sure that it's even and you can just shake it out like that. And I'm going to add that into my pie pan, and then on top I'm gonna finish off with a sweet potato layer on top. So because of the nature of the ingredients and how we've allowed time for the sweet potato cool down, this is a wonderful activity to do with family, especially if you have young kids in the house. And frankly, it's pretty fun to play with. And so I'm just going to make sure that the layer is fully, completely covered on top before I put it into the oven to broil for about 13 to 15 minutes. And now that the pie is in the oven, we're going to allow it to broil for 13 to 15 minutes, and be sure to check every 5 minutes to avoid burning. Okay, now that we pulled the pie out of the oven, we're going to allow it to cool and wait. So based on the recommended servings, this can feed about 2 people. You can split the pie directly in half. So if we were to use the whole mixture, and if we were able to make 4 of these 6 to 7 inch pies, you're able to feed about 8 people.